Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Health Check. Health Check is sponsored by Kingdom Health Connections, which is a health promotional resource center. It's all about cultivating the culture of health, wellness, and healing for you and the entire family. Come on in, everyone. Remember to like, remember to share this month on Health Check, where this is the opportunity where you can stop, take a minute, check in on you, check in on your health, do a self-awareness check. I'm your host, as you know, Dr. Vanessa Bolling. All month we've been talking about blood sugar control, ways in which we can control our blood sugar, whether we have a family history of diabetes, whether we have diabetes. Come on in, tune. Let's share it with our family members as well as our friends. This is an opportunity for you to really just do that self-awareness check, check in on your health, and get some charge. This is a place where you can really recharge when it comes to the focus of your health. I pray that you feel motivated. I pray that you're empowered to take charge. I'm so delighted. This whole month we've been having, or this month, at least last week, I mentioned we had our guest Kim, and I'm going to bring her on. Kim she is a certified diabetes care and education specialist. She's also a registered nurse. She's been a registered nurse for several years, and she's very knowledgeable about the subject of diabetes. Kim, I'm so delighted to have you again with us this week.
Thank you, Dr. Bolling, for having me back.
No problem, no problem. So the hot topic today, we talked about some diverse things about how we manage diabetes on last week. Some really great tips. Go back, check out the replay. Kim shared some awesome tips in terms of being your own inspector, detective in a sense, seeing what works for you. Love those tips. Made it so manageable, realistic. Kind of really demystified the fear that comes after the diagnosis. Thank you for that, Kim. So if you were on or missed last week's segment, go back and check in on it. But today's topic, we're going to be talking about what's carbs got to do with it. Carbs, what does carbs have to do with diabetes at all? Kim, go ahead and help us out. What does carbs really have to do with diabetes?
Absolutely. It's a really great question. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about carbohydrates and what they are. So, when we think of the topic of nutrition, we get our nutrients from a variety of foods. So, many people are aware of back in our childhood things like the food pyramid, where we're looking at things like dairy, protein, things like fats, things like carbohydrates, and fruits and vegetables. And many of these foods fall into the three main categories, which are carbohydrates, fat, and protein. So, with regard to carbohydrates, those are foods that we eat that are going to increase our blood sugar. And our body likes to get energy from carbohydrates. And so, we have been really conditioned, I would say, since childhood to eat things that are carbohydrates because we know that they'll sustain our hunger, provide nutrition for our body. But where we have some opportunity is to learn more about the portions and how we can control the amount of carbohydrates we are having if we do have diabetes and we're concerned with our blood sugar control. So, as I mentioned last time when I was offering some tips, there's a lot of information to explore about nutrition, and I would not want this brief bit of information to replace getting counseling from a nutritionist or a dietitian who can really go into depth with your height, weight, your current conditions, the medications you take, and what an appropriate nutrition plan would be for you. But focusing on the topic of carbohydrates, the idea with managing diabetes is that you want to have a consistent amount of carbohydrates entering your system through nutrition at a routine set time of day. And so a lot of people are skipping breakfast because they're in a rush, they're on the go, they don't have time, maybe they don't even feel hungry, but skipping that long period of window in the morning with no nutrition can cause your blood sugars to be a little bit off. And so one of the first steps that we recommend in starting to gain control of your blood sugar is thinking about having those carbohydrates at consistent times of day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and spacing those meals about 4 hours apart, and kind of managing the carbohydrate limit that you have at each of those meals. So the first step is really for us to better understand what carbohydrates are. So another term people think of with carbohydrates is starches, or they think of foods that are sugary or sweet. So carbohydrates are foods that we think of as starches, like breads, pasta, rice. But it also is things like beans. Beans have a combination of carbohydrate and protein, and it's all fruits that we consume, as well as some of the starchy vegetables like potatoes, corn, and other fruits and vegetables, or vegetables rather. So it's important for us to start to identify what are actual carbohydrates that I take in currently, and how can I look at controlling the portion size so that I can have that blood sugar control that I'm after. So some of the questions I often hear from patients or misunderstandings is that they think carbohydrates are only the sweet things, such as like desserts or pastries, and maybe bread. But sometimes they're not realizing that potatoes, rice, things made with flour. There's a lot of confusion around vegetables. As I mentioned before, I mentioned some things like potatoes or corn, but for many of the patients I work with that come from a Caribbean background, there's a lot of lack of knowledge around root vegetables that are carbohydrates. And so those include things like bananas, green bananas rather, plantains, cassava, some of the sweet potatoes that we consume. And a lot of different cultures from the Caribbean and South America like to have those vegetables with the protein, like a fish or pork, maybe chicken or beef. But being cautious with those items and thinking of portion control can be really beneficial for blood sugar control. So some of the tips are to start to think of eyeballing your portion size as a starting point. And so one of the things we can do is use our hand size. So like my fist size, this side, my fist size here. If I were to put this on a plate and I have bigger hands, this would be the portion size that I could have of my carbohydrate for breakfast. So let's say I want to have grits, turkey sausage, and eggs. So the turkey sausage and eggs are not carbohydrates, but the grits are. And so I'm going to limit my portion size to this. At lunchtime, let's say I was having potato, I would limit my portion size to this on my plate. And then for dinner, same thing if I were having something like rice. And so eyeballing portions can be really helpful in starting the process of working towards the blood sugar control you're looking for with limiting the amount of carbohydrates that you take in. There are further things that one can do to learn more about nutrition and carbohydrates, and that's going to involve nutrition label reading. So that's something we probably can tap into maybe at a later date and reviewing a nutrition label. But there are nutrition facts, including the carbohydrate total for the portion of that item that you're having. So some of the beginning steps is understanding on the nutrition label that it's talking about per portion size, not the whole box. And so there's a lot of power in recognizing what the portion size is. And then again, going back to that playing detective, looking to see, well, how does it affect my blood sugar the rest of the day? Fruits tend to be also very confusing for a lot of folks. And so
that's a good one.
Fruit is a healthy food. We get a lot of nutrition from fruit. Some of the simple tips are that we would rather have you chew and eat a piece of fruit rather than drink the juice. And so sometimes people aren't aware that a lot of fruit juice can really impact and increase your blood sugar.
Absolutely.
We want you to have the fiber from eating and chewing that fruit. So eating an apple versus drinking the juice, you're going to get the fiber and probably have not as high of a blood sugar increase versus drinking a juice. And unfortunately, some of the products we purchase in the grocery store have additional sugar aside from what just comes naturally in the apple, to make it sweeter and more, marketable towards people purchasing it. So unfortunately, when we enter the grocery store, while our mind kind of says, we're entering a safe place where we're going to purchase foods that are nutritious for us, there is a lot of mislabeling and a lot of misinformation, but the law requires that nutrition label is accurate. So that's really a good source of truth. But starting off with something basic like eyeballing your portion sizes is very helpful. So on the topic of fruits, some of the misconceptions are that things like berries are high in sugar. In fact, you can actually have a bigger portion of berries than you can with something like a mango or even grapes. So grapes have a higher amount of carbohydrates in them than some of the berries. And so thinking of portion control with fruit is going to vary based on the fruit. And so it's important to start to learn more about which fruits are higher in carbohydrates versus others. And then again, be mindful of that portion size.
That's good. That's good. And I see here that you've provided like some of these low carb fruits here. And really, I know we've talked before too, that the lower carb fruits tend to be more in the berry group. So the blackberries, the blueberries, strawberries are kind of sweet though.
They are, they're sweet, right? But you can have probably about a cup size. So if you were to take a measuring cup and cut up strawberries, as much as you can fit in that 1 cup serving is an appropriate amount of carbohydrates. So again, someone could consider having the eggs and turkey sausage and then that cup of strawberries as their carbohydrate source for their breakfast. The trouble we get into is if we're having a plate full of fruit. Right. So if we have diabetes and we're concerned with our blood sugar control, that might really spike our blood sugar. And so it gets into a discussion of really like, we're not saying fruit is unhealthy for you, but what we're saying is the portion control can really drive up your blood sugars. And that's something to be mindful of.
Yeah, I'm paying attention to those portions. So that sounds like it's a big, so again, getting away from the good foods and the bad foods, you know, the labeling of foods and then kind of having this inappropriate relationship with food. Anything to say with these low carb veggies here in particular, or is it the same concept with the?
So kind of the golden rule is that any vegetable that you can cook and sort of smash with a fork, that's really going to fall into the carbohydrate category. So lettuces, broccoli, onions, peppers, those are all very low carbs. And so you can have a much larger quantity of those because they're not going to drive up your blood sugar in the same way that fruit would. In the fruit category, I just want to clarify this. One of the tips that we're going to recommend is that you purchase the fresh fruits rather than having them from the kind of convenient pack and go cups of fruit, because many of those come in a syrup that has added sugar.
So high fructose corn syrup, right?
Yeah. So if you're going to have those fruit cups, you can start to look for ones that are not in that syrup. There are some more healthy versions that are not in that syrup, or you can drain the syrup out and just have the fruit without having the syrup. When it comes to the vegetables, really many of them are low in carbohydrates. The high ones, again, are potatoes, all versions of potatoes, sweet potatoes, purple potatoes, corn, the root vegetables that I mentioned. But on the flip side, things like lettuces, all varieties of lettuce, collard greens, broccoli, cauliflower, peas, like snap peas, zucchini. They're just many, many, many vegetables that are going to be lower in carbohydrates. And so you can have a larger portion. And so when we're thinking of plating our dish, if we were to think of kind of like an imaginary plate, if half of my plate were filled up with salad and I had 2 other halves on the other side, one from my carbohydrate and one, let's say like rice, and the other for my protein, like chicken, that would be a really nutritious meal that's not going to drive up my blood sugar excessively high. So that portion control has a big play in keeping the blood sugar where you want it. And again, the beauty of every new day, right? We're lucky we get the new day. God gifts us that. And then we can make a decision about, you know what, yesterday I had my auntie's lasagna that's so delicious I couldn't really control myself, and today my blood sugar is really high. What can I do different today?
What can I do different today? I love
last week we talked about going for a walk. Hydration can help, so drinking lots of water and just being mindful of what else are you eating, that at that, the rest of the day or the next day. And so if you had a indulgence the day prior, you want to be mindful and probably not do that today. And plan ahead. So let's say every month your family has like a family gathering and your favorite aunt makes that favorite lasagna of yours. Bring a Tupperware container and maybe limit yourself to say, okay, I'm going to make my plate, and half of my plate's going to be that nice garden vegetable salad. And then 1/4 of my plate is my lasagna portion. And that other 1/4 of the plate is going to be broccoli. And maybe you're the one in the family that starts to bring a tossed salad to all the family dinners, because we know if we fill up on our veggies, it's going to help us control the carbohydrate portion because we're already getting a little full from having that salad. So I really do not like telling the clients I work with not to have their favorite foods. I like to teach them about making decisions and kind of like bargaining. So if I have to have that lasagna today, what am I willing to give up the rest of the day to really make it work? Am I willing to add in a walk? Am I willing to increase my water? Am I willing for the remainder of the day to be really cautious with my carbohydrates and not have an excessive amount with my portions so that I can kind of balance it out?
I love this. Kim, some great tips. I do have a question about frozen fruits.
Yes.
Anything that you would say with that, or even frozen veggies as it relates to glucose spiking?
So, the frozen vegetables, not a problem because it doesn't change the carbohydrate count. For many of the frozen fruits, it's not a concern either because most of them don't have that extra syrup in that package that they're frozen in. The caution that we need to have is with thinking of something like a smoothie. So smoothies are very healthy. They can be very filling for us, and it's a great way for us to combine fruit, vegetable, and maybe some protein like a higher fat yogurt, let's say a Greek yogurt. So if we were to make a smoothie where we're using Greek yogurt, we're using something like almond milk because that's going to have lower carbohydrates than regular cow milk, and we're using, let's say, a cup of strawberries. Prior to maybe having diabetes, you may have maybe added pineapple and mango and you really weren't as concerned. But now if you're looking at controlling your blood sugar, maybe not having the mango and the pineapple, kind of limiting the portion size of the fruit, but thinking of something like spinach, adding spinach so that it's even more nutritious and filling, or kale. And oftentimes when you blend some of those vegetables up with fruit, you really aren't having, people will think like, oh gosh, I don't want to drink spinach or kale, but it really doesn't taste have a strong taste at all. So just being cautious with the portion sizes, but most of the frozen fruits are okay because they don't have that extra added sugar like the canned or little cup of fruit will have. But we would have to be mindful of the portion size.
Good point. Well, Kim, you really provided some awesome tips in terms of just making this more realistic, bringing it together, making it doable, and less threatening, bargaining. I love that point, to really bargain. So everyone tuning in this morning, you've heard it. We got the choice between life and death, blessings and curses. I call on all of heaven to witness the decision that you and also me, I make, and Kim makes too as well. Oh, that we would choose life so that not only we could live, but our children and our children's children, and you know the rest, can also live as well. Go ahead and put hashtag I choose life. Are you going to bargain this week? Are you going to take an extra walk? Maybe you're going to leave out the pineapple instead of doing the pineapple and the mango this week. Whatever the decision is, go ahead and put hashtag I choose life. Thank you so much, Kim.
You're welcome.
For your knowledge, and we'll see you again next week, Tuesday. If you have any questions, feel free to put them here on the chat. We do go back, we do look at them. Also tune in with us again next week, Tuesday, 9 a.m. on Facebook as well as YouTube. We're going to be talking more about ways in which we can control our blood sugar. So that way, one, we can not develop diabetes if it's in our family, or we can better control our blood sugars, maybe even reverse it. I know we can do it. So tune in for more as we share some helpful tips for you and the entire family in terms of being well. As also, let's remember that this coming Sunday is the blood pressure clinic. So if you are in the city of Hartford, the Apostles House, 131 Elliott East Street in Hartford, come join us for service. And after you're done with that, with service, getting your spiritual food, come upstairs to the second level. There will be a blood pressure clinic. You'll see myself and another one of the team members of the blood pressure clinic team will be doing blood pressures for about 30 minutes after service. So see us there. I'll see you next week, Tuesday, 9 a.m. Be blessed. Bye-bye.